Good evening. I hope my voice and sound is clear.
Absolutely clear, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining, sir. We'll be starting the session right away. I would request all the participants to keep their microphones on mute, and you may keep your webcams on. And once we start with the Q&A, sir, please suggest how would you like to have the Q&A session on I should take all the questions, or you would like the candidates to ask the questions?
I think if you take the question, there'll be much more systematic. Otherwise, there's a lot of crosswalk. And my request is that sometimes, within one question, there are three questions. I would answer all of those, but if those questions can come to me one by one, they'll be better.
So
the second question actually is.
Yes, I'll moderate all the questions, sir. So we will just start. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of I Am Rohtak family, I welcome you all to today's webinar session. In view of COVID situation, I Am Rohtak had taken an initiative to invite eminent persons to share their knowledge and experience to students of IIMs and IITs on how to remain motivated and committed to their goals with navigating this unprecedented crisis the world is facing in the form of COVID. I have a great pleasure and honor to have with us as our keynote speaker, Shri KBS Sidhu. Shri KBS Sidhu is a Special Chief Secretary with Government of Punjab. He also served as Deputy Commissioner District Magistrate Amritsar and Chief Administrator Punjab Urban Planning and Development Authority, among various other positions that he has taken with the government body. It is a great honor to have you here with us, sir. Thank you so much for joining. This session will be for 1 hour. The talk by the speaker will be for 30 to 40 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. The topic for today's session is leadership during crisis, lessons from COVID. I now invite sir to please take on the stage and address the audience.
Good evening, friends. I'm grateful to I Am Rohtak, in particular, Professor Dheeraj Sharma, the director of the institute, for having afforded me this opportunity to be with young participants of this esteemed institute. I understand this is also open on optional basis to students from other IIMs and IITs. Now, the topic that we have before us, for the time that has been allotted to us, given that it is pretty ambitious. Leadership during crisis, lessons from COVID. What is leadership? One will have to, at least in very rudimentary terms, talk about it. Then leadership, not a normal course of business, leadership during crisis. And within that, within the crisis, a subset of the COVID type of scenario. And then, of course, try and call out some lessons which would be applicable not only to a crisis situation or a COVID situation, but lessons for general use in the COVID and post-COVID environment, in your job, in your life, and so on and so forth. So, leadership is often juxtaposed with management, so leader versus manager. There's a lot of literature on this. I also happen to write on medium.com and leave a link behind that. It's actually a continuum. What do you do as a manager? What do you do as a leader? Manager is a more formal type of a thing where you have a staff who's in paid organization. There are lines of control, and of course, you as IIM students would better know what a manager is and what management is. But the whole idea is that you are controlling the team to fulfill the organizational objectives. Management is not a do-it-yourself affair. It is getting things done through people who are directly under your control. On the other hand, leadership is more nebulous, and there are no single uncontested definitions of leadership. The dictionary meaning which I picked up this morning is a person who leads or commands a group, an organization, or a country. So if you see, it is much wider. A, those people are not your paid employees. They may not take your directions. So you have to persuade, you have to cajole, you have to coax, you have to negotiate, you have to inspire. So the lines which you draw are kind of dotted lines. Therefore, the leadership function is far more difficult, in my personal opinion, as to when juxtaposed vis-a-vis what a manager would be doing. So therefore, everyone in this day and age is talking about leadership. Even spiritual gurus are talking of leadership in managerial or a corporate setup. Corporate gurus are talking in terms of bringing meditation, etc. That is not the scope of our talk this evening. But what happens when we take leadership into the domain of crisis? Now, apart from the dictionary definition, what we need to understand about leadership is basically that leadership in essence is about decision making. You have to make decisions. Those decisions impact a large number of people. They can even determine the trajectory of your organization, your country, your population, your clients, your customers, your followers, whatever constituency you have or you're addressing. So it is about taking decisions, taking discerning decisions, and then taking responsibility for those decisions. Ultimately, a leader cannot take decision and then, like a typical bureaucrat or a manager, try to hog the credit if he succeeds and apportion the blame if the things fail. A leader has to take responsibility for his decisions, and decisions which are discerning decisions. So that is what leadership is all about. There are various attributes. I'll briefly touch them, time permitting. But why should one exercise leadership? Apart from sometimes that it's your job, you happen to be a person, you happen to be holding a post, managerial, environment, a political, constitutional post, and there comes a situation where you have to assume a larger role than what you would be doing in normal circumstances. But basically, the essence of leadership, even if you go to the Holy Bhagavad Gita, even if you try to draw lessons from the Holy Ramayana, leadership is about some values which you hold very dearly, and therefore you are willing to stick your neck out, your personal life, your professional life, your reputation, everything for the purpose of attaining those goals which you hold very dearly, almost like the dharma as it was described in the Holy Gita. Dharma, not in the nature of an occupation or a profession, but a calling, a higher calling which you feel that has been kind of consigned to you, vested with you, bestowed upon you. So that is what leadership is, and that leadership you have to assume given the circumstances in which you find yourself in. Now, crisis, we have to come to leadership quickly, coming down to exercise of leadership in crisis. What exactly is crisis? The crisis is when things go wrong, when disaster strikes. We can be prepared for it, but we cannot predict it. Sometimes we cannot even predict it. So crisis, when you say, I think Shakespeare put it the best when he said, when sorrows come, whether those troubles, when sorrows come, they come not as solitary spies, they come in battalions. So when disaster strikes, when crisis comes, it is not some simple thing going wrong somewhere which can be fixed managerially or from an engineering perspective. A crisis and a disaster is, whether man-made or natural, goes on to a much bigger scale and a kind of a demographic scale. It may be localized to a particular geography or not, but the fact is that it is not something which is too localized within the organization. It impacts people over a large area, over a large population. Now, crisis, we tend to say, and this, if you go through the Disaster Management Act, which came in the year 2005, it talks in terms of disaster management. The word management is that almost we can manage disasters. So you have an SOP, as we like to prepare for an earthquake, for a flood, for a fire, for a terrorist attack, hostage situation. So there are number of crises and disasters which are kind of foreseen in the Disaster Management Act. And there are standard operating procedures or SOPs as we generally talk. But SOPs, look good on the paper. You may have an SOP for an earthquake. You may have an SOP for flood situation. River Ravi bisects India and Pakistan. The control on the other bank is with the Pakistan army, and the slope is towards our side. So if you are trying to in monsoon, tame the river or save your villages from deluge and huge population being marooned and potentially in danger of losing of lives. Your standard operating procedures may be lying on your computers. You may be able to access them, but the person on the spot has to take decisions, and not every contingency during disaster. When things are going wrong, when people in tempers are afraid, when the nerves are racing and pulses are racing, the standard operating procedures, even if they are there, cannot be 100% followed and cannot also be relevant because, after all, it is a futuristic exercise. On the ground itself, what happens in a crisis situation may be far more different. Therefore, discerning decisions, initiative, and going in a proactive manner, that is what is required. For instance, a standard clause, we are talking about a flood situation, is that normally the district administration would not cut the railway line. And sometimes the railway line itself is slowing down the flow of water, leading to submerging of various rivers. So, a deputy commissioner or a district magistrate who takes initiative, of course, there is a proper channel business. You talk to the division railway manager and he would say, okay, I've written to the railway board. By that time, scores of villages may be marooned, valuable lives may be lost. But at that particular time, sometimes you even have to save the life and then breach those SOPs. Again, going back to the bard Shakespeare, that sometimes it is a custom more honored in breach than in observance. So those are not the holy thing which is scripted that you have to follow. Tomorrow, if you follow an SOP word by word, no one is going to confer a Padma Shri onto you if, let's say, 50 lives are lost. On the other hand, will be rewarded with perhaps a Shaurya Chakra if you've cut through the railway line and saved and gone along with the rescue teams to rescue the villagers. So therefore, in crisis situation, it is not a cut and dried type of a scenario. SOPs are there. We need to have the SOPs. SOPs are updated. If there is a huge earthquake, as you had in Bhuj, what do? Everything is in shambles. The ambulances cannot reach. What does the SOP come into operation? So the local initiative at that particular time is of utmost importance. So therefore, crises are abnormal situations. Normal responses, in spite of being there in the books, will not work. And the person has to be constantly keyed and glued to take the initiative and solve the problem as it develops. It's a developing situation. So coming to COVID itself, if you see, I think it was notified as a national disaster by Government of India only on the 14th of April. So people didn't know what this COVID is. Some people were not taking it seriously. There were no standard operating procedures to begin with. The advice from the World Health Organization was changing day by day. The Indian Council of Medical Research, which is the national level body to talk in terms of the medical protocols of testing, etc., and the precautions, they were in the process of building their own protocols and advisories. But ultimately, the situation was developing and the leadership had to take the initiative. So therefore, COVID scenario within the crisis has, in my personal opinion, got two hallmarks. A, there were no standard operating procedures. The standard operating procedures, if at all there were multiple, sometimes mutually contradictory. The other thing was that the sheer size of this contagion or pandemic was literally worldwide. So you couldn't have any haven of safety, so to say. So if you wanted life-saving equipment, if you want testing kits, there was a shortage. Every country needed those. It was very, very simple for World Health Organization or ICMR to say, the whole thing is isolation and testing. How do you test? You don't have testing kits. And when you have the testing kits, the capacity of your testing labs is limited. So all those situations COVID threw up within a subset of crisis, a situation where there were no SOPs, or whatever was to be done, we didn't know. And when we knew, the supporting infrastructure, etc., was not. So it is in this situation that leaderships and leaders the world over have reacted, and reacted very, very differently. The American response and the Swedish response would be one, the New Zealand response would be another, China's own response would be something else. We are a federal polity in India. Our response, guided no doubt by the statutory orders issued by Government of India under the Disaster Management Act. But you're a federal polity, and different states were taking a different call. So here I would like to underscore from a slightly legal perspective that all the states are bound by the directives and statutory orders issued by the Home Ministry, Government of India, as far as lockdown, operation of railways, etc., whatever. But the states could issue more onerous orders. More onerous. They could not dilute the orders of Government of India, but they could be more strict and stringent. And similarly, a district magistrate handling a peculiar situation, which no state headquarter can envision or appreciate, could be even more stringent than the state government's own order. They, of course, could not dilute that order. So in this situation, leadership really had to take a call. And here, when I say there's a whole lecture which one can give on what are the attributes of leadership, I'll just quickly run through those points before we are able to interleave and interconnect those attributes of leadership with how Punjab as a state acted and reacted and responded to a crisis situation, and how we can link with the attributes of leadership. I attended a 2 or 3 week course of leadership in development at Harvard University. If you go, they said that there is nothing like leadership per se. There is only an exercise of leadership. You exercise leadership, and exercise leadership for what? As I touched earlier, for values that you hold very clearly and dearly. So I'll quickly run through the attributes of leadership. It is not my intention to, exponentially expand the topic, but just to give you an idea as to how the political and the civil service leadership in Punjab responded within the COVID scenario and draw some lessons. Firstly, exercise of leadership is risky. It is not business as usual. It requires initiative. It requires intuition. Everything cannot be deterministic, data coming, full-fledged data. You have to extrapolate. You have to take educated guesses. Because the time frame with which the decision is to be taken is limited. It requires personal sacrifice. Those who think that leadership is about a corner office of a CEO or a chief minister's Bangalore or a chief secretary or district administrator Bangalore, you don't know the hard work which those people have put in or required to put in during the situation of COVID at great personal risk. Many of our frontline officers, including people in the top political executive, have tested positive for coronavirus early on, in spite of all the precautions that were taken. And leader, of course, has to be fearless. Has to be fearless, but does not mean that he does not appreciate the dangers of the risks and does not kind of hedge those risks. And the leader, he must have the faith and trust of his followers. If people don't have faith and trust in the leadership, the statutory powers behind the order that we issue, people will still not follow. So that bond of faith and trust between the followers and the leader must be there. And most important, in any crisis situation, the leader must be seen. Well, this was a peculiar situation where people are being asked to be isolated, but people want to hear what the top man is saying. And the Punjab Chief Minister, Captain Amrinder Singh, through video conferences, through web conferences, through telephonic calls, was not only holding meetings, but also making random calls to a staff nurse in a small dispensary in Samana in Patiala, or to a head constable who might be regulating a curfew imposition in a village in Faridkot to say, hey, beta, how are you doing? So that is a twin purpose. Leader being aware of the situation, being in control, at the same time, a leader who's seen in a crisis situation, but more importantly, motivating the front warriors, because when this is happening, there's pessimism and there is a kind of a gloom and doom situation prevailing. And when the leader himself comes and talks one on one, then it creates that sense of trust, and the whole thing is kind of sorted out in a much better fashion. Now, quickly going through, I'm conscious of the limitation of time, is that in case of Punjab, we went in for a lockdown 3 or 4 days before the national lockdown. And we went through a lockdown not under the mild sections of the Disaster Management Act, but through far more stringent curfew provisions which are promulgated by the state government or the district magistrate under section 144 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. So we went and imposed that lockdown. Now, this is very simple in hindsight, because hindsight is always 2020. You say, yeah, you did it. What was there a paper order to be passed? You know, in a situation where people didn't know which way this COVID curve is going to go, people were saying that we got BCG vaccines put universally, so this type of virus is not going to affect our country. There were experts who were talking in terms of saying there is a milder strain of coronavirus which is coming in, and therefore you need not be worried. But Punjab took the situation and a proactive decision to say that we are going to take this decision, because otherwise you could be seen as reacting out of panic and premature reaction. But that was a call that was taken, and with the benefit of hindsight, I think the entire country in a way kind of followed that decision to impose curfew. Imposition is one, and then how do you tackle the human part of it, which automatically follows when you try to implement. But here, something which I'll mention, which is peculiar to Punjab, was that when the first news about coronavirus began to come, and even before 14th of March, when corona was declared to be a national disaster, so we had press news, Government of India advisories that we have 90,000 non-resident Indians of Punjabi origin who have come in the past couple of months and have not come back. Please check on those. We hope that they may not be carriers of corona. So even before there was a kind of a national appreciation of the whole situation, Punjab was very actively and proactively, I wouldn't say tracking the NRIs, but seeking their cooperation to home quarantine themselves. And those numbers kept on varying. Numbers came, there were duplicates. Government of India agencies were giving addresses as per the passport. And sometimes those are old addresses of a village. A person is living in a flat in Chandigarh. So it was very difficult locating them, but a huge exercise that was taken very tactfully. And ultimately, each and every of those 55,000 odd NRIs who were located, some of them had an address of Punjab but never came. They may have been in Delhi, they may have gone elsewhere. They were located and they were requested to home isolate themselves. And there was tremendous cooperation because that faith in the leadership was there. There was a counter argument that, hey, please keep on hiding. If you reveal yourself to the district administration, they'll put you into a COVID care center. And NRIs can be paranoid. The situation could have been that, okay, I don't have any infection, but by virtue of being put into some government-run center, perhaps I may get that infection. But then this decision was that please home isolate yourselves. And I must say that there was not a single case where from these NRIs that home isolated that any further infection spread. There were, of course, subsequent cases where resident Indians had gone abroad, mixed into religious congregations and so on, and the spread kind of continued. But the NRI thing was the first kind of exercise where all the agencies of the government, the district administration, the police, the hospital, the Panchayati Raj institutions were trying to locate, and that was a kind of, I would say, a dry run or a kind of a full dress rehearsal for what subsequently we did. Then, of course, we had advisory from Government of India regarding the Tablighi people. These are the mobile numbers of the people from Punjab who are, as per the records maintained in Delhi, attended that congregation. Kindly please isolate them. Or these people were a different kettle of fish. They would deny. Most of the time, they were not answering the phones. And sometimes the phone, which belonged to a lady in the Ahmednagar district of Maharashtra, was actually, she was found preaching in Mandi Govindpur town of Punjab. So we had to use all tactics, including technology, to kind of trace them. They were healthy people, but not cooperative. But ultimately, when they found that the government and the district machinery was fair to them, and it was for their own beneficial isolation, ultimately cooperation came. And mind you, in governmental setup, if they wanted mutton biryani, that was also served. The idea was that if an Indian citizen happens to be a carrier or courier of this, we have to save him as well as the other citizen without regard to what religious denomination he may belong to. And as a continuation, you see what goes around comes around. The Punjab government took a proactive decision. And that proactive decision was regarding the Nanded pilgrims in Hazur Sahab, one of the sacred Sikh places which we associate with Guru Gobind Singh. And those people had been locked up there, gone on pilgrimage for 40 days. So people were saying that for 6 weeks, we have been there. Officially, the toll of Nanded as a district is just one case. We are living in relatively clean surrounding. So, sir, please tell us, why don't you arrange for us to come back? So it was a decision which was taken. Those people were tested there also. They were found to be asymptomatic. Buses were sent, and those people came. They were tested at the borders also. But ultimately, quite a few of them developed symptoms. So it was important from a leadership perspective. The normal political leadership would have tried to pass on the buck. Okay, I asked the pilgrims to come back, but who was the civil surgeon at Fazilka when the buses came at 4 a.m. in the morning? Why was the testing not complete? Or when they came from the Bathinda side, what happened? You can always apportion blame. But here was a situation that these are our people. They are not like the Tablighi people who are trying to conceal their presence. We know from where they have come and where they are going. They were isolated and ultimately cured, and the cure rate was virtually close to 100%. What I'm trying to say is that in this situation, not only a decision which was taken, which in hindsight momentarily was looking, people were saying, they were there for 40 days, they ought to have stayed for 60 days. But what it also conveyed is that it was a kind of a control experiment for passive carriers. I am there as a pilgrim. I pass on infection to you. And for 14 days, nothing happens to you, but you are infected. You pass it on to the third person and to the fourth person, and the fourth person develops the symptom. So, in a way, it was kind of knocking at the very logic of a lockdown to say, okay, the entire country is going to be put into lockdown for 3 weeks. Jinko infection hogi, they will develop symptoms, we'll tackle them, and everyone else is good. That was the type of thinking which the ICMR was propagating. But ultimately, it became very obvious that this virus transmits in strange and funny ways which we cannot understand. But here, in the context of leadership, is a decision taken towards logical conclusion, no witch hunt, no passing on the buck, and trying to cure those people. And this equally applied to the quota students, students who were preparing Punjabi origin students for IIT, etc., in Kota and other towns of Rajasthan. They were also proximal. And it was not being apologetic after the decision, but saying that these are our people. We cannot abandon them, whether in a Gurdwara or whether in a hostel or a PG accommodation. We have to take care of them. Another big test of leadership was the Shramik trains, where labor from other districts or other states of Punjab, these trains were to be arranged by the district administration in conjunction with the railways, of course. But totally, who's going to board, from what point, testing, this huge exercise was sorted out to the minutest detail with social distancing norms and so on. And a very bold decision was taken by Punjab government. They said, irrespective of what the railways are going to pay, not pay, concession, whatever is the bill for a Shramik train will be paid by the Punjab government. So instead of 1,200 people for a train trying to enter into transactions, the deputy commissioner would give the draft to the station master with a list, and those list people were sent SMSs. They came well in time, buses to pick them up free of cost, testing before they boarded, and of course providing them food, etc. on the way. And that is why, if you see, statistically speaking, the labor which went from Punjab into various states, on an average, did not test more than 1 to 2% corona positive in their hometowns. On the other hand, trains which emanated from Delhi, and maybe off by a few percent, but almost 1/4 to 1/5, between 20 to 25% people tested positive. So that kind of showed very clearly as to what was the extent of the spread of the virus. But the leadership was, okay, these people are working for us. They may be permanent resident of a UP or a Bihar, but we are not going to ditch them in this particular point. We are also not going to stop them from going to there. There was a very, very vocal voice. Sir, they are sitting here. We are providing them dry rations and so on. Why should we make arrangements for them to go? Let them be here. In a couple of weeks, the situation would be fine. We got a wheat harvest. We require labor for that. Then paddy transplantation. Our industry is going to ground to a halt. But it was very clear in exercise of that leadership, the initiative, and the human angle, the empathy, that no, these people, if they want to go, when you are in a trauma, when you are in a crisis, everyone wants to go to their home. And we cannot, as a state government, put impediments, rather we should facilitate. And if we are nice to them now, perhaps they would come back. And I'm happy to report that a large number of them are actually back. My own hunch is that another couple of months, and by the time we are ready for the paddy harvest, most of those labor would be back because they were taken care of. A word about the police leadership. Normally, police, one would say that police is there only for the purpose of enforcing the curfew. तो बाहर आएगा तो पंजाब पुलिस वो डंडा मारे. Police role in kind of its CSR almost, in terms of langar, arranging for that langar, distributing food and so on. So that was tremendous. So big backup to the district administration. And I must say the way our deputy commissioners, we were 22 districts, the way they conducted themselves with very scarce resources in an exceedingly difficult situation, distributing dry rations, coordinating with the NGOs, and then, of course, the entire health part of it, which is, too voluminous for me to even go into this within the limited time available to us. What are the COVID care centers, tertiary, primary, so on, testing, and then situation where you had, people saying people saying, my father or my mother has died from corona, I'm not going to cremate. So it was the Patwaris and the Napsildars of the revenue department who actually did the final funeral rites. So these are the leadership initiatives which no amount of written direction otherwise inspiring people. Those were done during the course of this crisis. I personally was a financial commissioner of revenue, and the disaster management department comes within the revenue department. The district collectors, the commissioner, right down to the Patwari. And I did realize in the early days, a single case would create a panic in a locality. And since our testing was being done at Patiala and Amritsar, there would be unconfirmed news that so and so has tested. Official confirmation would not be available because it would come to the home district of the civil surgeon. And by the time the evening bulletin was out, there was a whole lot of panic and rumor. So I took it upon myself to say, I'm going to be talking to the deputy commissioner and getting that information and putting it in the public domain. No fun in trying to underplay. You say, in this locality, so and so person has been found. So that people keeping in touch can kind of take own further precautionary measures. There was a big debate as to whether their names should be on the public domain or not. So we did not put personally identifiable information in the public domain. But the information regarding the infection, the locality, etc., was in advance disseminated in the public so that the question of panic and rumor that was curtailed. That is not an SOP, but something which we felt required to be done and we did it. And after that, now people are saying that we have more corona cases but less panic. At that time there was hardly any corona cases and people were reacting in panic. That is how human psyche and human psychology kind of adjusts and so on. Now, the last phase of this little talk, which I would like to take on, is about crisis. Now, I think it was Churchill who said, the crisis is too valuable an opportunity to be allowed to go waste, because that is the time when maximum reforms, which otherwise were not possible, we could do. So, fine, this was a crisis situation, but apart from just learning lessons as to how to tackle the crisis, can you get something positive out of it? Again, it was, I think, Shakespeare and As You Like It. And I'm not a student of English literature. I'm basically an engineer by training, electronics, and then I picked up my economics degree from Manchester, UK, way back in 1996, 97. So Shakespeare said, sweet are the uses of adversity, which like a toad ugly and venomous wears yet a jewel in its crown. So Churchill saying this, and how did we use this opportunity? I'll quickly run through what I think the Punjabi entrepreneur, the Punjabi farmer, the Punjab civil service, the political executive, what were the positives that we were able to extract and juice out of what was a bad and almost a hopeless situation? Firstly, in terms of paddy harvesting, of wheat harvesting, most of it was done by the combined harvesters. But still the manual part is there. Most of our boys who would sit idle, get labor from the outside states to do the job. They had to do it. They did it. And similarly, when the paddy transplantation came, that is a much more technical exercise. The Hari labor is back-breaking exercise. Not only our people did it, but also the transplantation directly, rather than from the flooded field. The saplings, saving water, saving money, deploying your own labor, and also saving the valuable repatriation to other states. Our Punjabi farmer was able to do. As a civil service, we had been talking about e-office and e-files, for so many years. But in this situation, that reform automatically took place because there was no other way that government and governmental offices could work. And of course, Zoom meetings and meetings like this, people certainly realize it is far more efficient, traveling from here to there. And automatically, if they are recorded, full minutes are virtually there. I mean, there cannot be any ambiguity as to what the decision was taken. So, again, some questions people ask. That's a very relevant question. Maybe some of you would have had in your mind, and I'm preempting that. Is that this is, sir, in a calamity situation, our civil servants, our bureaucracy, right from the chief secretary level down to the Patwari, they do work beautifully well. Look at elections. In elections, people are working round the clock. Not a single minute of delay can be tolerated. Why does this not happen in normal course of business? This is political interference. So on. Those are the type of questions which are posed to us. Now, my take is that when you have a calamity type of situation or an election type of situation, then the entire focus of the entire state machinery of the people is squarely focused on tackling that. Everything else in terms of school being open or not, or road being made or not, those things take the backside. In normal governance, with the limited resources, in terms of money, in terms of managerial capacity, you have to do everything. So obviously, the type of clinical efficiency, so to say, which we see in this situation is not to be seen in normal situations. I remember when I was deputy commissioner in early 90s, for the first time, plague broke out in Surat town, which is now the cleanest town in Gujarat, and it was dubbed as the most dirty town at that time. And we used that situation to drive the dairies out of this town where people have been crying for decades. Kind of a calamitous situation, we said, no, we can't do. We have to push them down. So calamity is something, disaster is not something you wish and pray for, but when it happens, you have to take charge. Again, going back to my tenure at Amritsar, in a single calendar month, it was April 1993, we handled 2 hijackings both successfully. In one case, the person was made to surrender. In the other case, the commando stormed in and he was killed. In those type of calamitous situations, there are no SOPs. A young deputy commissioner with barely 8 or 9 years of service is thrown into a situation where you have to tackle, and both successfully. And this was before the 1999 Dhar fiasco, where the plane originally had landed at Amritsar. It was allowed to take off. And people were saying, congratulations, the trouble is over. Whereas we didn't know the protocol, but our decision, the SSP and the deputy commissioner, was at no cost. The plane can and should be allowed to take off because A, is more dangerous in air than on ground, and B, should he go into foreign territory and Pakistan is 10 minutes of flying distance, then you have no control and it internationalizes the situation. So friends, this is about leadership, this is about calamity, this is about crisis. We cannot wish and pray for crisis situation to exhibit our leadership. You may be the right person at the right place. And there are situations where you have to seize the initiative. You can be like Nero fiddling when Rome was burning and say, I'm safe, my family is safe. That's one approach. The other is more like Hannibal, that I'll either find the way or make the way. So I think leaders have sometimes this type of greatness thrust upon them. And the people who take the initiative are ultimately able to not only have a great amount of intellectual and mental satisfaction, but also be seen among the people long after you've left the stage as some people who selflessly work to ameliorate their whatever sufferings, and an attitude that was empathetic during that situation. So friends, this was our brief talk on what is leadership, leadership within crisis, within COVID, and what are the takeaways, what Punjab did, and what relates to the various attributes of leadership. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take any question and answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an insightful talk. You have covered a lot of points and gave a lot of inputs about what initiatives have been taken by the government. Taking the questions, I have got few questions that have come. The first one is, what role does communication play to make environment more inclusive? So here's a very specific point, like passing off less information to prevent people from panicking, or providing accurate information and wider information even at the cost of mass fear. So what is your opinion on that, sir?
My answer is very clear and explicit under all circumstances that in this day and age, you cannot hide information. Ultimately, that information is going to be there. So once the credibility of the government or the civil servants or the political executive is lost, then whatever you may say after that, people are not going to believe you. Number two, what is more important, if there is an adverse news, if I've tested 10 people as positive, or 100 people as positive, or 1,000 people as positive, once you disseminate that information, you are also talking about the measures that you are actually taking to contain that situation. For instance, in Punjab right now, we are getting 500, 600, 700. One particular day, it was almost close to 1,000 now. And then again, back to 500 and 600 cases. Then what we have also to say, some of the states, I wouldn't like to name them, in some cities, particularly big metropolitan towns, they try to hide these figures. So people lose confidence. So once the correct figures are there, you say, okay, even if I'm getting 1,000 cases per day, mostly people are asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic. They are staying at home. Please, you don't need to worry. This is the helpline number to which you got to call in case you need any help. These are precautions that you need to maintain. And even if all these 1,000 over a period of 14 days are to go to hospitals, our tertiary care, secondary care, and COVID care centers are fully geared. So therefore, if you think the panic will spread if there is incomplete news, there is rumors, there is distortion, and also where the leadership is seen as inactive, inert, not empathetic, not doing anything, and not communicating. So you cannot hide the bad news. Please share that news along with what proactively you need to do. In public relations, they say if good news is not going to get in, then bad news will automatically get in. If a few lakh acres of area is deluged by floods, and I'm trying to underplay that in this day and age where people are carrying cameras, ultimately the thing will come out. Rather, we should say this has been done, but special authority ordered. The people who have lost livestock, they're getting this. There are 4 lives lost, they're getting 4 lakh per person, and we are taking care of this. So, in any panic situation, and that equally applies in a corporate culture, there's, I'm told, special courses where you talk in terms of corporate management, how to really tackle the thing. You have to put maximum information in public domain. Say, all right, it has happened. We're tackling the situation. And the other thing is not starting a witch hunt. It's very simple to say that in a witch hunt, that thing has happened. I'm going to suspend that doctor because that VVIP patient died there and their ventilator is not working. So to answer again in a very succinct manner, please don't hide bad news or negative news. Share it as early as possible, as clearly as possible, but accompanied by whatever you are doing to save the situation and take it from there.
Thank you, sir. The next question we have is, in your opinion, how much you feel that free reign or autonomy should be given to the subordinates to deal with the crisis situation at the time of an emergency?
You see, it's an open-ended question, and basically would depend upon the style of, the leadership style of the person in question. And when we talk in terms of leadership, there are no right or wrong ways. There are leaders who are more centralized and leaders who are more delegating in nature. Now, my personal opinion is that in a situation of a crisis, the person at the spot, for instance, our deputy commissioners, we had authorized them to take any decision whatsoever. And if there is something which, or there is a standard protocol, up to this you can take this decision in financial terms and so on. And if something is going beyond that, you're not asking him to, write a letter and that is going to be then dealt with, consulted with the finance department, and after 15 days you are going to, convey the decision. So, if the person has not been authorized or empowered, the channel of communication should be clearly open. He should be able to talk to the Financial Commissioner of Revenue, who's in charge of disaster management at any time of the day. And he says, sir, all right, for instance, the train fare we've got, but your instructions are silent about the bus fare. Do we collect those 40 rupees odd from each person? Now, my immediate reaction was that, if you're paying 600 bucks and you collect this 40, then you as a state government cannot say it was free of cost. I said, okay, go ahead and do it. It is my job to get it approved from the state executive committee and issue the instructions. Again, to answer and to conclude, as far as possible, the person at the site should be authorized to take decisions within the overall template. And should a situation warrant where he goes, we should go by his report and ultimately regularize his decisions as quickly as possible. But the person on the spot, his judgment and his appreciation of the situation must be honored by the top leadership.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, you were talking about the attributes of leadership. So in your personal opinion, which is the most important attribute for a leader to want to act as a good leader?
I think it is a package, and some of them can actually be seen as mutually contributory. But I think basically basic attribute is that you need to have a cause which is very dear to you. And coming back to Gita ka Gyan, they say, "Kaam karm karo, but phal ki ichha mat karo." Phal ki ichha, in my opinion, and in a management level set, is in the nature of personal dividends which you want. So ask says, please don't hanker after that. But does not mean that you are not discerning in your decisions regarding the impact on your followers, your customers, your constituents, your citizens, the subjects of your kingdom. So therefore, you have to be discerning. So I think it's being true to yourself, being true to the cause that you hold dearly, and empathy, honesty with your leader, your followers. Those are the qualities which every leader must have. Everything else is an add-on, which kind of adds to being a successful leader in terms of taking the right decisions, risky decisions, and decisions in the right time frame, being able to communicate. So all these attributes are kind of complementary. In some situations, they may also be mutually contradictory. But I think being true to yourself, being true to your followers, and being true to your cause, and then doing what it takes, those are the essential ingredients of exercise of leadership, in my opinion.
Thank you so much, sir. So we can take one last question.
Sure, it's up to you. I have time.
Okay. So the next question is, like, at the time of crisis, government authorities are taking their stands and they are taking initiatives as per their responsibilities. And also, there are people who have taken leadership roles who are celebrities or probably people from the influential side. What is, in your opinion, can an average citizen contribute at the time of crisis? And what is the crucial role that an average citizen can participate in?
This is a question which came very frequently to us and still is coming. I mean, there were any number of NRIs sitting outside, they say, within Chowda Bazaar, Ludhiana, where my father originally came back, I want to run langar. Then our reply, now we're talking in the COVID specific situation, was that in this situation, A, your people would not be able to do it. B, there could be complementary organizations working in that area. So someone has served langar now, and you are going to distribute langar at the same time, so person is not going to eat 2 meals, 2 meals. So therefore, if you want to do, coordinate with the deputy commissioner at that particular time. So that was a general type of signal that we were sending to people that this is not where you can venture out. Each person doing would only create a helter-skelter type of situation. So random efforts, again, almost cancelling each other's effect. To go through the deputy commissioner, he'll be able to say, okay, we'll organize this for you. Let's do it this way. And otherwise, in terms of pecuniary things, the chief ministers and the prime minister relief funds, those are available. But some people normally in a flood situation, they would, which is different from a COVID situation, like to themselves go into the village, distribute to people. If it is winter, give clothes and so on. There is an earthquake in Gujarat, truckloads would go, even to Nepal, Punjabi people have sent stuff. So those type of the civil society, NGOs contributing their might as in MITE, their bit to the relief efforts is always welcome. But in the COVID scenario, it was where, by virtue of going out in the streets itself, you were exposing yourself and others to potential infection. So we had to basically do it in coordination with the deputy commissioners. Or they could, if they feel, provide the equipment to the deputy commissioner rather than cash. If you say, I want to the 500 personal protection equipment or so many tens of thousands of masks and so on, people have done that. It is also gives the citizen, the community, a sense of involvement. The village level Panchayati Raj training schools for women, they churned out in tens of thousands and lakhs of masks and so on, used by the police, the people elsewhere. So yes, they have to be complementary, but done systematically. And in COVID, we have to be very careful as to how to take on that.
Thank you so much, sir. On behalf of I Am Rohtak community, I thank Shri KBS Sidhu for joining us and giving us valuable insights on the current crisis and also sharing his hands-on knowledge on leadership and current situation. Thank you so much, sir, for sparing time and joining us and giving us valuable knowledge. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you all of you for joining, the host as well as the director I am. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. Thank you.